Right on. What's good, Caitlin? So the question you asked is actually a really good question. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna straight with you. I got it wrong the first time I did it, but I'll explain how I got it wrong and why. So I'm just gonna start by making sure that we understand the question. The first thing is that we understand that there is a foreign exchange rate, okay, and then they charge a 4% fee on the converted cost. So the fee is calculated at the end of the cost on the conversion. So I'll explain what that means in a bit. Some other things that we find out is that she or he, Sarah, sorry, purchases something for 602 rupees. And then the bank posts a charge of 988, and that includes the 4% fee. So when I read this problem, what I want to do is I want to figure out how to remove the 4% fee so that I can answer the question. And this is where I got the problem wrong. I didn't read the question, and I got a number that was the reciprocal. Like I said, I'll talk about it a little bit more. So it says, what is the foreign exchange rate in rupees per US dollars? That is crazy important. That's what I forgot. And did the bank use for Sarah's charge? Round your answer to the nearest whole number. So no decimals are needed for your final answer. But until you get there, you're probably going to want to be using decimals. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about the 4% fee. What this is saying is that the $9.88 is the amount of money, right? So it's the money plus the fee. All right, so it's the amount of money plus the fee. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting. Uh, I say interesting for myself, but it gets a little interesting in the fact that the fee is actually a percentage, right? It's a percentage of the dollars that we spent. So the 988 comes down to the cost plus 0.04 of the cost, right? So it's a percentage of the cost that we're paying. So the 988 is the cost plus a 4% on the cost itself added to it. Now, this might look familiar or not yet. This might look familiar when I factor out what they have in common, the common C, to something that looks like this. The reason I say this might look familiar is that in Algebra 2, we studied the equation A equals P times 1 plus R, where R is the rate. And the rate here is 4% for the fee. So it's 1 plus the rate, 4%, times the cost, and then that's going to give your annuity or your total charge on the bank. And if you're like, that kind of looks familiar, but I remember it being a little bit different, you're right, because it was A is equal to P. I'm going to geek out right now, I'm sorry, plus 1 times R to the power of T, where it was compounded every year. And then I was like, but what if we wanted to compound it, a certain number of times every year? And then it was 1 plus R over N. And hopefully this is looking crazy familiar right now. And then we got to the infinity idea and we said A equals P E R T. So that's what we talked about last year in Algebra 2, but we don't need to worry about that. This problem here really is just going to focus on this equation right there for the rate. Okay, now, long story short, or long story less long, what we're going to do now is we're going to solve this thing here. So we know that the 988 is equal to the amount of money that we're going to spend times 1.04. 1 is for the amount of money you spent, and then the 0.4 is for that extra fee that they're charging us. Now we can solve for how much we spent by dividing both sides of the equation by 1.04. So we divide by 1.04, and this gives us 9.5. Now remember, this is in US dollars, so writing it as $9.50 makes way more sense. So this is what we spent. Now, other things you might want to write down is that this 9.50 is in US dollars, USD. I worked at a bank, and that's what we would use the USD for anytime someone was bringing in money in US dollars and we needed to convert it. So I just call it USD. Some people, they just write the dollar sign in the front. It's up to you on how you want to do it. I like the USD specifically for this question. All right. So we now know that Sarah purchased something for $9.50 in US dollars. And we also know that she actually bought it in rupees. So the $9.50, and this is where it gets really, really weird, the $9.50 in US dollars is equal to 602 Indian rupees. Okay, now that looks really weird if you think about it. You're like, 950 is equal to 602. Right, it doesn't make sense until we take a glance at some other ideas. What if I told you I had 5 dimes? Would you agree that 5 dimes is the same as 10 nickels, right? Now, this right here is how money conversion works, except you know the relationship between dimes and nickels. What we're trying to do is express it as US dollars to rupees. Now, if I asked you how many nickels per dime, what you would say is 10 nickels per every 5 dimes. And then if you wanted to, you could reduce that and you would say 2 nickels to every 1 dime. And now you have the conversion of nickels to dimes. It's 2 nickels to every dime. Now, if you flipped it upside down, and this is the mistake I made, is I wasn't reading the question, what we would get is 5 dimes to every 10 nickels. And if we reduce this, and when I say reduce it, I mean actually divide it out, we get 0.5 dimes to every 1 nickel. And if you think about that, that does make sense. A half of a dime is a nickel. So what we're going to do is virtually the same exact thing here. Now, what I saw in the textbook or what I saw in the solutions, they don't really do it this way, but this totally works. You just write the conversion. So we want to go from rupees per US dollars. That means we want the US dollars in the denominator. So we're just going to write 602 rupees for every $9.50. And that's in US dollars. But we want to convert it so that the denominator is 1. The easiest way to do this is just to divide. Now, when I first did the problem, I put the 950 on top and the 602 on the bottom. That's because I was converting the rupees into US dollars. There's not a conversion here. It just asks you what is the exchange rate for rupees to dollars. So you want to put rupees on top and dollars on the bottom. The word per means to divide. So you're going to take the rupees and you're going to divide it by US dollars. And that's why I'm putting rupees on the top and US dollars on the bottom. Now, after I plug this in my calculator, I get something like, oh, I forget what the actual number was, but it's something like 63.3 dot, 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 and that would be my answer, but we need to round it. So we're going to round this to 63 rupees for every US dollar. And that's how I would do this problem. All right, Kaylin, I hope this helps out. If it doesn't, come by my class and we'll talk about it. All right, I'll check you later.